Good morning. Well, Dave just finished up at the pain rehabilitation clinic at Mayo Medical Center in Rochester, and he just finished up on Friday. He graduated from pain rehab clinics. That was kind of a cool deal. I just, you probably think, graduated from pain rehab clinic. What in the world is that? But anyway, it happened. And so earlier this week, Dave and I were talking, and I said, honey, do you want to preach this week, or do you want me to preach this week? And he goes, well, I don't know. And I said, I don't know either. I said, you know what? I'll ask God. That's always a good plan. I said, I'll ask God, and if God gives me something, then I'll let you know, and I'll be glad to share that on Sunday morning. So about 3 hours later, God said, boom, fearless obedience. Last week, we talked about fearless change, and this week, God said fearless obedience. Now, this is such a huge topic that I cannot even pretend to tell you that I'm going to cover this as well as it could be covered, but I am going to tell you that it's going to take me more than one Sunday to cover it. So this is probably going to be at least 2 parts, fearless obedience. And let me start with a little story, because stories are always good. And to many of you, this is a familiar story, and maybe some of you, this is the first time you've ever heard this story, but it's a story I know really well because it's our story. And Dave and I got married 45 years ago. We celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary last week, as a matter of fact. And shortly into our married life, we realized that God had a call on our lives for ministry. Now, actually, Dave knew this. He started telling me this when we first started dating. I didn't grow up in church, so I really had no idea what he was talking about, but he was cute, so I was willing to go along for the ride. Which explains a lot of the relationships and probably a lot of the relationships problems that we experience in the world today. But anyway, so I thought, well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, So anyway, so we got married very young, and that's a kind of a long, sad story in some ways, turned into a happy story. But it started out to be not such a great story. I mean, I just have to be absolutely honest. And so about 7 years into our marriage, Dave was transferred right here to Clear Lake, Iowa, to be the manager for Scale Gas. He worked for a propane company, and he was, as a matter of fact, the youngest manager of the largest branch in the country. It was really a big deal for him to be transferred here to Clear Lake. It was really cool. I mean, he was really doing well in his career. He had gone to Bible school early in our marriage and actually kind of dropped out. It wasn't a very good experience, and we kind of put that whole ministry thing on the shelf, thinking that probably wasn't really God, and it probably wasn't going to work for us. So Dave went into this new career, was doing extremely well, and we met some people named Harlan and Rosemary Powles. They're not here today, so I'd talk about them if they were here. But we met Rosemary Powles. As a matter of fact, Rosemary called me one night. We were brand new in town here in Clear Lake. It was August of 1980. We had 2 little kids. We'd bought our dream house. Dave had a brand new company pickup. I mean, life was good. And I got this phone call from this lady, and she said, I heard you're new in town. She said, would you guys want to come to a Bible study? We have a Bible study at our house. And I thought, yeah, I'd like to go to a Bible study. I'd like to meet some people. And Dave goes, no, I'm not going to a Bible study. I know everything about the Bible, and that God thing isn't working for me right now. And I said, oh, come on, honey, we got to go to this Bible study because we need to make friends, and so let's go to this Bible study. So I talked him into it, and I drug him to this Bible study, and he was so obnoxious at that Bible study that I wanted to crawl under the table. I was so embarrassed, because if you ever met one of those people that know everything, and they're not afraid to tell you how much they know, because they know everything. And they know everything because they've tried everything, and they've done everything, and it didn't work, so therefore, it's the truth, right? Yes. They know everything. It's the truth. So here we are at this Bible study, and I'm embarrassed, and Dave's obnoxious, and we get home, and Dave goes, I really liked those people, Harlan and Rose. That's Nate Barinholtz, Grandma and Grandpa, as a matter of fact. He said, I really like those people. Let's invite them over Saturday night. I said, they're not coming over because you're a creep, and they don't like you. No, I probably said this was the story of our marriage in those years, okay? And he said, no, invite them over. So I invited them over, and they came. Bless their hearts, they're kind people. They came over. We had a nice visit, and they said, there's this new church in town that just got started called Agape. Do you guys want to come tomorrow morning? And we were like, well, I don't know. We need to meet people. We need to make friends. Church is a good place to meet people and make friends. So let's go. So we went the next morning. And when we went the next Sunday. And then we went the Sunday after that. And every week that we went to church, Dave got madder and madder and meaner and meaner. You didn't know I was going to tell this story, did you? It's a great story. It's a true story. And to the point where we would leave church on Sunday morning, we'd get in the car, and I'm like, I am never going back there because this church turns my husband into a raving maniac. He's mean and ugly when he goes to that church. I'm not going back there. Have any of you ever experienced that? Yeah, we did. People, for whatever reason, I'm sure I know whatever the reason was, but for whatever reason, we kept going back. About 4 or 5 weeks into this thing, the pastor, Mitch Anthony, gave a beautiful message. And at the end of that message, he gave an opportunity for people to come forward and just lay down their lives once again. And Dave walked up to that little makeshift altar at the community building right here in downtown Clear Lake, and he gave it all over to God one more time. And God met us there, and our lives were transformed beyond anything we could have possibly imagined. And we were like, oh my gosh, this God thing is real, and God really loves us, and he was showing us his love, and he was showing us who he was. And we started getting super involved in this church, and we started going to Bible studies. We were on a regular basis to the point where pretty soon we were on the leadership team. Pretty soon we were teaching a Bible study, and we were just, Mitch, whatever you need us to do, we are here to serve, we are here to help. Anything we can do to help this church, we will do. And that was our attitude, and that was our mentality. And then one day in about probably March of 1982, Dave was driving to work one day in his brand new company pickup. And he had such an experience with God that he had to pull off the side of the road. I mean, it wasn't an audible voice, he said, but it felt like an audible voice. And he had to pull over to the side of the road, and God was just speaking to him so clearly. And God said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Ramah, and I want you to be there for 9 months, and then I want you to go to Jefferson. Now, remember this part, because this is an important part of the story. And so Dave, in fear and trembling, I mean, he came home that evening, and I could tell that something was going on with him. I could tell he was visibly shaken. And he came home that evening, and he was like, Kris, we got to talk about something. And he was scared to death to have this conversation with me, because you got to understand, we were in our 20s. We thought we had it made. We had bought our dream home. He was making more money than we ever thought possible. He had a brand new company pickup. I had a really nice car. We had these 2 beautiful little children. We had really good friends. We loved our church. We loved our life here. It was so far the best time of our life. And he was scared to death to come home and share with me what God had spoken to him that day. And he walked in the door and he said, Kris, I need to talk to you about something. And I said, I had a dream last night. I said, I had a dream that we left here and that we went back to Bible school. And now that's another important part of the story, because he had a almost audible voice of God. I had a dream. God confirmed his word to us, and within 3 months, we had sold everything we owned. We bought 2 rickety old cars. We had enough cash in our pockets from the sale of our house to pay for 1 semester of school and 1 month's rent. And we took off, and we went to Tulsa, and we took our little children, and we moved from our beautiful home of our dreams into a 2-bedroom apartment in a not a very nice part of town. And we obeyed God. And that's kind of a dramatic story. But every single one of us have a story or a series of stories about obeying God. And the name of the lesson today is fearless obedience. And I am not here to even try to convince you that these things happen without some humanity creeping in. It's scary stuff. Sometimes God asks us to do things that it's scary stuff. So we're going to look at that. We're going to explore that story a little bit more. We're going to tell a little bit of the rest of the story as we go forward. But let me just preface this by saying, why do we, in our humanity, why do we cringe at the word obedience? How many of you love that word? You love that word. You like it if you're training your dog. I mean, I'm thinking our puppy needs to go to obedience training, and I think that's going to be a really positive thing. But most of us don't love it. Yeah, Dave said right after, we're going to send Dave to obedience training, then we're going to send the dog. He said that, I didn't, okay? That did not come from me, that came from him. But most of us cringe at that. When your parents say, I want you to do this, and it's not something you want to do, how do you feel about that? Bad. That doesn't feel good, does it? How about when an employer tells you to do something that you don't want to do? How do you feel about that? You do it. How do you about a teacher when they tell you to do, or a coach when they tell you to do something that you don't want to do? How do you feel about that? We cringe at the word obedience. Why are we afraid to obey? How do we know what we're supposed to obey even? How do we hear God? How do we know? What does God say, and what happens when we walk a life of obedience? We're only going to get partway through this today. We're going to finish next week. But we cringe when we hear about obedience because we're afraid. We're afraid this isn't going to go well for us. We're afraid somebody's going to ask us to do something we don't want to do. We're afraid somebody's going to ask us to do something that brings us maybe some discomfort. We're afraid somebody's going to ask us to do something that is going to go against our plan and our purpose for our life. And so we really cringe when we hear obedience because we're afraid. How many of you have ever said this? I say it a lot because I'm not all that great at this. And see, I stand up here and talk to you guys about this stuff, but I'm only able to do that because this is really hard stuff for me. I mean, I don't talk to you about this stuff like somebody who is really good at this or somebody who has all this figured out. I talk to you about this stuff because this is stuff that we all deal with on a regular basis, including me. So how many of you have ever said, you're not the boss of me? And you probably think it 10 times more than you say it. Well, you're not the boss of me. And you know, this whole obedience, I mean, rebellion is kind of ingrained in us. I mean, it comes naturally when we're a little kid. Doesn't it? Have you ever had a little kid that just does everything you ask him to do the first time you ask? Never. Never has that child ever been born except Jesus. Jesus probably did he did everything he was supposed to do the first time he was asked, but I think he's the last person that could claim that. Because in our humanity, there's something in us that wants to do it our way, that wants to be in control, that wants to rebel against anybody's idea that doesn't line up with our idea. And that's just a matter of fact. And we cringe when we hear that word obey because we don't trust that God has a great plan for us. Our culture, our very culture, the country we live in prides itself on independence and self-dependence. We got the Declaration of Independence. I mean, we are like independent people. We consider that a hallmark of that's supposed to be what makes us great. And it is a part of what makes us great as a country. But when it comes to our relationship with God and even with one another, independence is not a relationship builder. Independence is a relationship destroyer. But our culture teaches us to be strong, to be self-dependent, to be independent. We're afraid because we don't want to lose control. In our own way, whether we're passively this way, whether we're aggressively this way, or whether we're passively aggressively this way, every one of us want to be in control. I mean, there are some people that are labeled control freaks. They are control freaks. Well, they're probably not any more of a control freak than you. They're just more aggressive about it. Because who doesn't want to be in control? Who does not want to write the story of your own life and control all the circumstances in your life and all the people that play into all those circumstances? Who doesn't want that for life to go your way? Because let's face it, we feel safest when we're in control, right? Or when we think we're in control. And so the whole thought of obedience many times scares us because we feel like we're going to lose control. The fact of the matter is we really didn't have any control to begin with, but that's another sermon for another day. We want to plan the outcomes of our lives, and we don't want to give control to anyone or anything. We're afraid of obedience. We cringe at the thought of obedience because maybe things in the past didn't go like you expected. Maybe you really stepped out in obedience and obeyed God, or you really stepped out and you thought, wow, I'm going to obey God, and because I'm going to obey God, my life is going to be perfect. I honestly thought, and now I don't know if I ever said this, maybe I did, I don't know, but sometimes we don't know what we think until we look back on our lives and the actions of our lives and how life went, and then we realize, oh, I thought that way, that was really wrong. But I really thought that if we obeyed God and went into ministry, like we really knew that this was God, that Dave was going to go to Bible school for 9 months, and then we were going to go to Jefferson, and so we thought, now let me tell you, and then we're going to talk about this more later too, because there's a lot of scripture to back this up. We thought that if we obeyed God, life would go perfectly for us, or really, really well. We thought that if we listened to God and then put our own interpretation to what God said, that maybe we could move this thing just a little differently into what we thought would be a really good idea. And let me give you a little hint about God. Rarely does God show you the whole story. Usually he speaks to you one step at a time. And so we hear one step, and then we put our own thought process to it. And we plan out the whole, I'm a planner, I plan out the whole next 10 years based on the first step. And many times that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. So sometimes we're afraid because things in the past haven't gone as we expected. We can't see the bigger picture. We're not supposed to see the bigger picture. God doesn't want us to see the bigger picture. I want to see the bigger picture. I really want to see the big picture. But God really doesn't show the big picture because he doesn't want us to see the big picture, because if we knew every step beyond that first step, why would we need him? Why would we need faith? Why would we need trust? Why would we need hope? Why would we need any of those attributes that God puts in our hearts? Why would we need any of those things if we could see the whole picture? So here's what happened. So, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to go great. We're going to obey God and everything's going to be great. So we get to Tulsa, and it wasn't that great. I mean, we moved to this crappy little 2-bedroom apartment out of our beautiful, we had a really lovely home here in Clear Lake. Lovely, lovely home. We sold it. We had nothing in our hands but, like I said, 1 semester tuition, 1 month's rent. So we get there. I got to go find a job, and I find this job. It's a really hard job. It's a really demanding job. It's a job that I got to drive a long way to get there every day and a long way to get back every evening. It's a job that I got to put my little tiny elementary age children in this school that they have to walk back and forth in not such a safe place and not such a safe neighborhood. It's a job that, God gave me the grace to do the job, but it was a really hard job and they paid me really badly. I was a closer for a huge real estate company. I had 60 agents that I closed loans for. I was the only closer in the company. I ran millions and millions of dollars a week in closings. This was the age before the internet. I couldn't Google things to find answers. If I got an attorney's report or an attorney's opinion on an abstract and there were problems on that, I couldn't Google an answer. I had to do deep, hard research. I had to call people to get quitclaim deeds. I had to call county assessors. I had to call courthouses and try to track down all kinds of things that were causing a house not to be able to close. And then I had realtors. I was either their best friend or their worst enemy, depending on how quickly the closing was going, because they didn't get paid till I got my job done. It was a hard job, and they paid me $800 a month. And our rent was $575. And we still had to eat. And we still had to put gas in the cars. And we still had to have insurance on the cars. And so then Dave went and got a job as a custodian, and he was working, going to school every day and working every evening, and I was working all day every day and coming home and taking care of the kids at night. And it wasn't easy. It was hard, and it wasn't going very well. And we were working hard, and Dave was studying hard, and life was hard, and we didn't have enough money. But God saw us through miraculously. And at the end of that time, we left there with not one penny of debt, even though every single month we were in the hole. We left there without one penny of debt, and we left there with life experience that would bode us well the rest of our life, but it didn't go the way we thought. And then, remember the word from God? Remember? 9 months, and then go to Jefferson? Well, we got there, and all the instructors were telling Dave, well, you got to be here at least 2 years. This is a 2-year program. You can't only be here 9 months. You got to be here 2 years. And he was going, oh my gosh, well, I thought God said 9 months. And then I thought we were going to go start a church in Jefferson. And what are we supposed to do? 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 There was all kinds of anxiety, all kinds of fear. Have I ruined my family's life? Did we sell everything and leave everything? And I messed up. So that first year we go to Jefferson on spring break, and we find out there's already a great church there. It's only a town of 4,000 people. We're not going to move in next door and be the save all wonder people of Jefferson, Iowa. We get there and we find out that not only is there already a wonderful church there's a wonderful church there that believes and preaches the same things we believe and preach, and who is pastored by wonderful people, and there's no way we're going to go there and set up shop. So now we really messed up. God, you said 9 months and then go to Jefferson. And we went to Jefferson to scope out the land, and there's nothing there for us. This wasn't going well. So we go and we knock on the door of the pastor's house. And we say, with our little children and sad looks on our faces. It was dark. It's a cold March evening in Jefferson, Iowa. And we knock on the pastor's door, and they were kind people. They're still good friends. They're great friends. We didn't know them. We didn't know them then, but they invited us in. And we said, we think we just ruined our lives. Really, a pastor, take my word for it, a pastor does not appreciate an in-the-dark, cold March evening, knock on the door with 2 sad adults and 2 very sad little children walking into their home and telling them that they think they ruined their lives. This is not something we live for as pastors. But we did this, and we were those sad people, and they embraced us, and they took us in, and we sat and we visited, and we said, this is what God said, but you guys are already here, and we can't come to this town and set up shop because you guys are doing a great work. And they said to us, you know what? We believe God told you the right thing. Why don't you come and help us? So we thought, yeah, okay, now this is going to go great. Now we're going to move to Jefferson, just like God said. Now we're going to team up with Dave and Becky Schroeder, who are still very dear friends of ours, and we're going to grow this place, and this is going to be awesome, and we're all going to we're going to just have a wonderful ministry right here in Jefferson, Iowa. So we, once again, packed up the kids, packed up everything we owned in our crappy 2 little cars, drove to Jefferson, Iowa, had 0 money, but no debt, had 0 money, 0 job opportunities. The church could not pay us a penny. Still not going like we planned. We get to Jefferson. We rent the one house in town that's available for rent. At that point, we didn't care what house it was. There was one house for rent in town. We rented it. They rented it to us with no job, no income, and no money. Dave got a job making $5 an hour painting a farmhouse. And we went to work in this church doing anything they wanted us to do, whenever they needed us to do it, because that's what God said. But wow, it wasn't going the way we thought. It was not going. So why are we afraid? We're afraid because we really have had experiences in the past that when we were being obedient, that did not go as expected. Just because things aren't going as expected doesn't mean it's not God. So, why else are we afraid? And we're going to move into, we're going to close this pretty quick, and next week we'll do part 2. But why else are we afraid? We're afraid because we really don't know the nature of God. We're afraid because we deep down inside think maybe he's just a little bit mad at us. We're afraid because deep down inside we think, maybe that he's a God who's just waiting for us to make a mistake. Just waiting for us to make a mistake so he can put his thumb on us and say, there, I gotcha. Why do we think God's like that sometimes? And that's all. Again, that's more than a message. That's a series. That's a conference. But why do we think God's like that sometimes? Well, because that's been our life experience sometimes with our natural dads, and so we anticipate that anybody that calls himself father is going to treat us just like our natural dads did, right? I mean, sometimes we have these perceptions of God that are absolutely unclear and absolutely untrue and absolutely distorted. And we don't really know who God is, so we're afraid when he asks us to do something because he might not have our best interest at heart. It might not go as planned. So we're gonna stop there. I know. You're going to have to come back next week, but thank God for YouTube, because if you can't be back here next week, you can watch it on YouTube. But next week we're going to look at the obvious question, I think, because this is all well and good. And, it's great for you that God spoke to Dave in his pickup and that God spoke to you in a dream. That's all well and good. And, lucky, happy you, great, yeah, good for you. But I don't even know how to hear from God. How do I even know what to obey? How do I even know when God is speaking to me and asking me to do something? How do I even know what the first step is that God has for me? How do I hear his voice? So next week we're going to look at how do we know what we are to obey? How do we hear God? We're going to go on and we're going to look at, hopefully we're going to see this next week, we're going to see what God says about obedience and what we can expect in life when we walk a life of obedience to God. We can't expect everything to always go the way we think it's going to. I think we've probably all understand that and have all experienced that multiple times. But we can expect that there's going to be a blessing attached to it, greater and more wonderful and more far-reaching than anything you could have ever dreamed or imagined. So next week we're going to hopefully finish this. If not, we got a week. That's one of the great things about pastoring. If I were a conference speaker, I'd have to wrap this up in 20 minutes and you'd all leave here so confused. But because we're pastors, if we need to, this could be a 6-week series, right? And so at least it's going to be a 2-week series, but we're gonna continue next week with fearless obedience. And what I'm going to ask today is I'm going to ask our prayer people to come on up forward, and we're gonna pray together. And I think what we're going to do this week, it's good to have a focus, maybe something that we could process and chew on a little bit through the week. And this week, if we can't do anything else with this message, let's just dare to give God permission to speak to our hearts. And again, there's a whole lot more to that, but sometimes we close our hearts off from hearing God. Sometimes our walls are so thick and so deep and so wide and our arms are so crossed that we've shut off our heart from even hearing God because we're afraid, because we don't know if we can trust, because things haven't gone the way we thought they would, because we have tried before and it didn't work the way we thought it would work. So this week, if we can just do one thing, let's just dare to open our hearts and say, God, I open my heart to hear your voice. We'll look at that next week about some of the ways God speaks, whether through his word, through a human voice. Sometimes God speaks to us out of human voices, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we continue this story that I started today. But if we could do that, so let's stand to our feet. We've got these people up here who want to pray with you, talk with you, just love on you. They'll never judge you, but if you've got anything that you want to just talk about that you need some help with, they're here to just pray with you about those things. So you feel free to come up and do that. But let's just corporately take a few moments here, and if you dare, Give God permission. Father God, you can repeat after me. Father, thank you that you love me, that you're a good Father. You always have my best interest at heart. Sometimes I don't understand your plan, but I know you have a plan for me, and it's a good plan. And it's a plan to bless me, and it's a plan to bless many, many, many people. So today, God, I step out and I give you permission to speak to my heart, to show me the next step. Not to show me every step, just the next step. And I'll receive that, Father, knowing that you love me and you never will hurt me. Thank you, Lord, for speaking to me. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, come on up and receive prayer if you'd like. You are dismissed. God bless you. Go out and have a great, great day and a beautiful, blessed week.